gave me a new microphone, and I didn't know how to work it. I didn't know how to work the old one either, but so I'm sorry to be 30 seconds late here in getting started. We're studying in the 38th chapter of Jeremiah, 20th verse. Jeremiah 38:20. Let's bow for a moment. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful unto Thee for the blessings that we enjoy, for the things that we often take for granted, both physically and spiritually. Pray that Thou would bless us this hour, and then bless us in the worship hour. Help us to do good with the blessings we have, and as we worship this morning, may it be in spirit and in truth. In Jesus' name, amen. Jeremiah chapter 38. There's some officials in the early part of the chapter. Some of the officials decided to kill Jeremiah. Now that wasn't too unusual for Jeremiah's life. Somebody was always trying to put him in jail or persecute him or stone him or otherwise get rid of him. They certainly didn't like what he had to say. And you know, as we view our social order today, it's disruptive. There's lack of unity. There are problems. There are people killing each other. There are political issues, religious issues. But I would suppose that all the turmoil in our country pales to what the turmoil would have been in that Jerusalem society. Don't you imagine some of those people in Jerusalem were escaping to other countries that weren't at war with Babylon? Don't you suppose that some of the folks, maybe more religious folks, some of those folks that wanted to adhere more closely to the law of Moses, I suppose some of them got out of Dodge. They just went to the hills and established communities out in areas that weren't particularly populated. There were those that defected to the Babylonians. There were those that went to Moab. If we get far enough along in our study this morning, we'll find that the king of Moab was trying to interfere with Israel's politics, so to speak, or Judah's politics, after the main body of them were carried away into captivity. And of course, there were 3 assaults on Jerusalem. So everything was in tumult. Everything was, unsettled. And so that was the situation there. And of course, we don't know anything about those other, what was happening in those other areas, because the emphasis here was on Judah. Jerusalem was on the city of Jerusalem, and on the deal with Babylon. Now, King Zedekiah was at odds with Jeremiah, but periodically he called for Jeremiah, and we noted that last week. And so it was kind of in that context. We'll begin with verse 19. And Zedekiah the king said unto Jeremiah, now, he sends him to prison. Then he needs to see what God's saying. It calls him out. It calls him to him. And Zedekiah said, the king said to Jeremiah, and of course Zedekiah was the last king of Judah, I'm afraid of the Jews that are fallen out to the Chaldeans. See, some of them had defected to the Chaldeans. And he was concerned that they would be on his case. I'm afraid of the Jews that are fallen out to the Chaldeans, or the Babylonians, lest they deliver me into the hand, and they mock me, shame me. And of course, mocking or shaming an official like a king, that was not good for their psychic, so to speak. But Jeremiah said, "No, here you'd wonder why Zedekiah didn't take comfort in what Jeremiah was saying, and follow the path that Jeremiah said was the right path." He says, "Obey, I beseech thee, the voice of the Lord, which I speak unto thee. So it shall be well unto thee, and thy soul shall live." Now, pretty straightforward, pretty good direction there. "But if thou refuse to go forth, this is the word that the Lord hath showed me." Now, if you don't follow this path, you will then be in a world of hurt. And Jeremiah describes kind of what that's going to be like if he doesn't obey the word of the Lord. And the word of the Lord was submit to the Chaldeans, submit to the Babylonians. But here's kind of the scene that would take place if he doesn't. "And behold, all the women that are left in the king of Judah's house shall be brought forth to the king of Babylon's princes. And those women, that is the people that are surrounding you, serving you, coddling you, so to speak. They, when they're carried away into captivity, they will be saying, kind of directing this back to the king, thy friends have set thee on, and have prevailed against thee. Thy feet are sunk in the mire, and they are turned away back. Saying, the friends that Zedekiah were depending on, they've forsaken him. And now, see the people that were in his close quarters, when they're carried away, they're going to be against you, the king. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to say, well, where are your buddies? Where are those prophets that said everything's going to be okay and the Chaldeans, the Babylonians aren't going to bother us? So they're going to be turning against you. In verse 23, and they shall bring out, and here's the scene, and you can imagine that Zedekiah had to be thinking about this. And they shall bring out all thy wives and children, their family. The Chaldeans are going to take their families, the Babylonians, that is. And thou shalt not escape out of their hands, but shalt be taken by the hand of the king of Babylon, and thou shalt cause this city to be burned with fire. Now here's the choice. Obey the voice of the Lord, the directions of the Lord, or your families, your close associates are going to be taken away into captivity. They're not going to have any respect for you. They're not going to have any loyalty to you. And besides that, this city shall be burned with fire.
Now, don't you think that Zedekiah, he wanted God to do what he wanted, rather than him doing what God wanted?
Yeah, Tim is mentioning here that Zedekiah's interest in Jeremiah at this point in time to find out if God would be doing or would be in accord with his will. That is, he is apparent from what happened that he wasn't interested in what God's will was. That's apparent because he didn't obey it. So if Jeremiah could have brought the message that Zedekiah wanted to hear, then fine. But obviously, Zedekiah was not interested. Even at this point, we might say he should have been able to read the tea leaves. He should have been able to figure out that these Babylonians meant business. And even though they had attacked once, carried away people, attacked the second time, carried away people, surround this city. I mean, the city, Jerusalem was high enough that they could look down and see all those troops around. And he was too hard-headed to accept the reality.
I just think, too, that it points out how long-suffering God is. I mean, to give them this kind of option at this late hour, where the city could have been saved. They were going to go to Babylon, but they could have been spared in that regard.
And Tim points out the long-suffering of God in this case. Now, let's take that back a little further. 100 years or more than 100 years prior to this, northern Israel was carried away into Assyrian captivity. Now, that should have been clue number one. And then the first assault on Jerusalem. That should be clue number two. The second assault, clue number three. And now we're ready for the first or the fourth clue, the fifth clue, or how many? I mean, they had. The handwriting was on the wall. They should have been able to understand that. Then, and who's going to be responsible? Who's going to be blamed? Who's going to be responsible for the destruction of Jerusalem? According to this, yeah, thou shalt cause this city to be burned. Zedekiah, you're the guy that's going to cause this city to be burned. Verse 24, then said Zedekiah unto Jeremiah, let no man know of these words, and thou shalt not die. You see, there was disharmony within the administration. Some of the king's supporters and minions were opposed to Jeremiah, and the king said to him, now, don't disclose all that we've talked about, because that'll be, you see in verse 25, but if the princes, that's his cabinet, his associates, the people that are supposed to be loyal to him. If the princes hear that I have talked with thee, and they come unto thee and say unto thee, declare unto us now what thou hast said unto the king. Hide it not from us, and we will not put thee to death. Also what the king said unto thee. Well, do you suppose, this was supposed to be a kind of a secret meeting between Jeremiah and the king. Do you suppose that there were people around watching every move that Jeremiah made and the whereabouts, his journeys, his travels? Yeah. There was turmoil in the city. Nobody trusted anybody else. There was no trust. There was no loyalty. Or there was, at least the loyalty was, and sometimes, in some cases, the loyalty was to Babylon. Do you suppose when Jeremiah was saying to the people that Babylon is going to take over this, don't you suppose some people, he was saying, submit to the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. Don't you suppose some of those people left? Well, we know that some of them defected from the scripture here. But anyway, so this encounter, there's some of the people, some of the scholarship in the 1800s and Bible scholarship in the 1800s. Some people said that, or thought that Jeremiah told a lie here. It was lying about this endeavor here. There's no real indication that he was lying about. He just didn't tell him everything that said. I mean, he told him that he had a meeting with the king, and there was they laid it out. But we won't go into that. But verse 26, then thou shalt say unto them, I presented my supplication. This is what the answer to these investigators was. You just tell them, I presented my supplication before the king, that he would not cause me to return to Jonathan's house, and that was the mire, the pit, to die there in the dungeon. And then came all the princes. Sure enough, all the princes came into Jeremiah and asked him, and he told them according to all the words the king has commanded. So they left off speaking with him, for the matter was not perceived. They didn't have privy. Those princes didn't have privy to the total conversation, nor should they have. And it wouldn't have been smart for Jeremiah to reveal everything that they were talking about. So that seemed to satisfy them. So Jeremiah abode in the court of the prison. That is, he was still under house arrest until the day that Jerusalem was taken, and he was there when Jerusalem was taken. So here's Jeremiah, was under house arrest until Jerusalem was taken. Now, he certainly, if there's nobody there, if the people that had him arrested, if they're gone or they're under siege, then Jeremiah's going to be, kind of free. But he was there until that assault. And then in verse 39, things get interesting for Zedekiah. In the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month came Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and all his army against Jerusalem, and they besieged it. Now that was in the 9th month, or that was in the 10th month. Now in the 11th year of Zedekiah, in the 4th month. Now, that's about an 18-month period then, right? Now, can you imagine? Let's suppose Franklin County was just surrounded by a foreign army, and they shut off transportation, shut off, and people here, how long would it be until we ran out of food? Medical supplies. How long would it be until people started fighting over a piece of bread?
It would be immediate. It'd be like that episode of The Twilight Zone where the Martians did that. That whole city, they started killing. Almost immediately, that one neighborhood.
Yeah, and Josephus, in some of his writings, that Jewish historian, said that they got so bad they were practicing cannibalism. So that siege, why did it take the Babylonians so long? Why did it take them so long to enter the city? Well, the walls around the city. The walls were there for protection. And you can imagine that there were soldiers on the walls, tossing stones back at them or whatever they did militarily. In the 11th year of Zedekiah, in the 4th month, the 9th day of the month, the city was broken up. What's that mean? They breached the walls. They got into the city. Now you can imagine what kind of conditions they found when the armies come in. You can imagine what kind of conditions they found there. Well, what kind of conditions? Dead people. Stench. Would have been an awful scene. People were cut off. Nothing to eat. In verse 3, and all the princes of the king of Babylon came in and sat in the middle gate, even Nergal-Sharezer, Sam-Garnebo, Sershechim, Rab-Ris, Nergal-Shazer, Rapnig, with all the residue of the princes of the king of Babylon. Now, history would indicate that Nebuchadnezzar himself was north, a long ways north of Jerusalem, and his commanders, military commanders, were there in charge. And so you see what was happening here. They breached the wall. The military officials come in. They set up headquarters inside the city. See, they set up. Now you've got the army of the Babylonians inside the city. They've set up headquarters there, and they're ready to, capture, kill, whatever they wanted to do. They had breached the city. And all the princes of the kingdom came in, and they sat in the middle gate, and they all were there ready to do what was necessary to shut down the entire city. Came to pass in verse 4 that when Zedekiah, the king of Judah, saw them, now, where Zedekiah was at the time that they had set up headquarters there in his city. But when he learned about it, when he saw them and all the men of war, that they fled and went forth out of the city by night, by the way of the king's garden, by the gate betwixt the two walls, and they went out of the way of the plain. Now, they not only did they apparently had an outer wall, they had an inner wall. So if an enemy would breach one wall, they'd have another wall to breach to get in. But so here's Zedekiah takes off. Was he worried about his people? No, he's going to try to save his own hide. He's getting out of there. But the Chaldeans' army pursued after them and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho. Now that would have been about 15, 20 miles away that they caught up with him. And when they had taken him, they brought him up to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, to Riblah in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment upon him. Now, the king of Babylon was quite north of this area, and so it might have taken them several days to get to taking him to, I suppose, a contingent of military people took him to Nebuchadnezzar. And so what happened to him? Well, we've mentioned this a number of times before. First of all, the king of Babylon pronounces judgment, guilty. Kills his children, 2 children in front of him. Took his eyes out, blinded him, bounded him with chains to carry him away to Babylon. Kind kind of like what Jeremiah said would happen if he didn't obey the voice of the Lord. And then what happened? Chaldeans burned the king's house and the houses of the people with fire. I suppose anything that would burn, they burned. And break down the walls of Jerusalem. Now, the temple was gone too. It would be not broken down. When Zerubbabel and Nehemiah and Ezra came back to Jerusalem some 70 years later, what'd they find? Rubble. You know, everything was shot. Verse 9, and then Nebuchadnezzar, then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, he must have been the military commander of at least this operation, this military operation of the king of Babylon. He carried away captive into Babylon the remnant of the people and remained in the city. That remained in the city, and those that fell away, that fell to him, with the rest of the people that remained. Now, I have no idea what was happening here. I suppose if some of the people, surrendered, they might have just carried them away in captivity rather than kill them. But then in verse 10, but Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left of the poor of the people, which had nothing in the land of Judah, and gave them vineyards and fields at the same time. Now, I wonder why he left those people that had limited resources or no resources, maybe no real estate. He left them there to tend to make a living. Wonder why they do that. What would happen if they didn't have any people around that area? What would happen to it? It'd go into the wild, right? Wild animals that grow up. You ever notice what happens to a building or a facility where there's nobody tending to it? Trees grow right up through the streets. Grass will penetrate up through an asphalt driveway. Ever have that happen? Well, I've got a little grass coming to my driveway, which means I need to tend to the driveway. It'd return to wilderness within, 70 years or so. It'd have been just total wilderness. Well, depend on Rich for some interesting comment. Thank you. Okay, then. We've got this situation where, the captain of the guard was kind of, after all the battle and people carried away, he was kind of there mopping up. We might say he's mopping up. There's still some things to do. There'd be still some people lingering around that weren't carried away in captivity. And so he was kind of organizing what was going to happen. In our history after World War II, there was a lot of mopping up to do in Germany and Japan and around the world, And our government mopped up a lot different than other governments would have mopped up, But he's now he says, now Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard. Now, wait a minute. Here's Jeremiah, a prophet in Jerusalem, and here's Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who has military enterprises all over the place, all over the known world. Well, how does he know Jeremiah? How does he know of Jeremiah? Pardon me? Somehow through the providence of God, he knew something about Jeremiah. Tim? Pardon me?
He knew Daniel. Daniel knew Jeremiah.
He knew Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Ezekiel was over there prophesying, wasn't he? In the Babylonian Empire. And so, I suppose the king had spies. Well, he had people that would inform him. He had informers, I'm sure, all over the place. And so, about through the providence of God, and I wonder why. I wonder why he, there were other prophets of God, right? But he focused on, seems, from what we know, maybe there's some things we don't know, but he focused on Jeremiah, and he told his military commander, "You take him and look well to him. Do him no harm, but do unto him even as they shall say unto thee, as he shall say unto thee." In other words, he gave him the freedom to his military commander. You give him what he wants, what he needs. You take care of him. And you see that there's no harm that comes to him. So Nebuchadnezzar, Adon, the captain of the guard, sent, and Shashban and Rabsus and Nergal-Sharezer, Rabmag, and all the king of Babylon's princes. So there was quite a contingent of the leadership that was, I suppose they were, had something to do with protecting Jeremiah. Now, in the midst of all this, and probably at some later moment, now the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah while he was shut up in the court of the prison, saying, now this section of the chapter probably was in a different time frame than what we just discussed. But the word came to Jeremiah while he was still in the court of the prison. You see, he was not in the court of the prison when he was, confronted by the military leader there and protected. But here's a little snippet of information that Jeremiah's prophecy just kind of sets forth, or does set forth. Now the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah while he was shut up in the court of the prison, saying, Go and speak to Ebed-Melech, the Ethiopian, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts. Now, where do we run into this Ethiopian? What had this Ethiopian done? Well, he had rescued. He appealed to the king and got a contingent of 30 men to haul him out of the dungeon. You remember that from a week or two ago. And so here's another person that where now the light is focused on him. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will bring my words upon this city for evil, and not for good. And they shall be accomplished in that day before thee. Now, this is what was spoken to the eunuch, the Ethiopian. But, things are going to be obliterated, destroyed. But I will deliver thee in that day, saith the Lord, and thou shalt not be given into the hand of the men of whom thou art afraid. For I will surely deliver thee, and thou shalt not fall by the sword, but thy life shall be for a prey unto thee, that is, a reward unto thee, because thou hast put thy trust in me, saith the Lord. Now that Ethiopian, when he came to the king and asked, for permission to deliver Jeremiah out of that dungeon, he was a believer. He was, and this verifies that, because he had put his trust in God. So that little bit of information there kind of slipped in, kind of like a preacher sometimes, is preaching away and then has a little sidebar. That ever happen? A little sidebar comes in, and they talk about that. Okay, so chapter 40, the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord after. Now this was after Nebuchadnezzar, the captain of the guard, had let him go from Ramah. Now wait a minute. Something's happening here. It doesn't seem quite right. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah from the Lord after the captain of the guard had let him go from Ramah. Well, what was he doing in Ramah? He was freed in Jerusalem when he had taken him, being bound in chains. Oh, wait a minute. Bound in chains here. The military captain was to, you take care of him, give him his freedom. Now he's bound in chains among all that were carried away captive of Jerusalem. Ramah was outside of Jerusalem, and it must have been a staging area for, the captives who were there, and then they were taken off into the Babylonian territory, which were carried away captive into Babylon. Now, apparently, in all this confusion that would take place, apparently somebody that didn't have the complete information about, Jeremiah's release. Apparently, he got among the captives again. Somebody must have just, yeah. So then the captain of the guard, they found they apparently learned of this, and the captain of the guard took Jeremiah and said unto him, the Lord thy God hath pronounced this evil upon this place. So now the Lord hath brought it Wait a minute, here's this Babylonian talking. Where is he getting this information? Let's read that again, verse 2. And the captain of the guard took Jeremiah and said unto him, The Lord thy God hath pronounced this evil upon this place. Now the Lord hath brought it, and done according as he hath said, because ye have sinned against the Lord, and have not obeyed his voice. Therefore this thing is come upon you. And now behold, I loose thee this day from the chains. To see, he had been chained up here. So apparently somebody got mixed up and chained him up after he was after the Nebuchadnezzar had been told to take care of him. And now behold, I loose thee this day from the chains which were upon thine hand. If it seem good unto thee to come with me into Babylon, come, and I will look well unto thee. But if it seemed ill unto thee to come with me into Babylon, forbear, or stand down, relax. Behold, all the land is before thee. Whether it seemeth good and convenient for thee to go, thither go. Now, how'd this Babylonian get this information that God, the Jehovah God, brought all this destruction? I mean, isn't that interesting that this Babylonian captain is saying to Jeremiah, the prophet, God has brought this, your God has brought this destruction on you. God is working here in this scene, of course. So Jeremiah then is released, and of course, I don't, in my mind, I don't have this, the historical sequence, the chronology. But, with Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being in Nebuchadnezzar's throne room, so to speak, we don't know what all they said to. We know some of what they said to Nebuchadnezzar. But no doubt there was a lot of interaction between these Hebrew, what we call the Hebrew children, and Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. And so, and of course, Nebuchadnezzar had people surrounding him. So we don't really know what these people knew about Jehovah God, but they probably knew something, because Daniel was there. In those, and as I said, I don't, in my mind, I don't have the sequence of events, the chronology here. But nonetheless, we have a situation where a Babylonian captain at least has some information about why God destroyed the place. Now, while he was not yet, it's Jeremiah now, and while he was not yet gone back, now let me read verse 5. Now, while he was not yet gone back, he said, Go back also to Gedaliah. Now, Gedaliah, his family was close to the throne, and Gedaliah was put in charge by the Roman authorities. He was put in charge of, whoever was left in that Jerusalem area. And so he's told go back also to, that is, Jeremiah was told to go back to Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, whom the king of Babylon hath made governor over the city of Judah, and dwell with him among the people. or go wheresoever it seemeth convenient unto thee to go. So the captain of the guard gave him victuals, or food, substance, and a reward or gift, and let him go. So now Jeremiah is being treated as a celebrity, as a person that has some standing with the government of Babylon. So we'll pick up next time at verse 5 of chapter 40 of Jeremiah.